The 21st of March was one of the worst days in the South African history. Thousands of protesters led by the resistance leaders stormed the Sharpeville police station. The police and military responded by firing into the crowd with live ammunition. 69 people were killed, including women and children. This day is considered a turning point in the struggle against apartheid, and it drew international attention and support. It's now 64 years later, and you would think that those who were at the forefront of the fight against the apartheid government would be honored and rewarded by the new victorious leaders. But sadly, that's not the case. In fact, not much has changed for these people. Listen to these interviews with the survivors 60 years after that day.
Ladies still crying. Some, they died crying, staying in a shack. But our government is promising and doing nothing. Worst of all, no more jobs. You go to school, you come back, no work. With your certificate, I still say it's all in vain. My two friends that died that day, to me, they were failures.
Ha o sa tshware tsamaya ka tsona strateng re bona diphetho di le ngata ka tsela eno le ka hara Sharpeville hape re phunya ga batho bana ba 1960 bana ba rona ga ba sebetse mesebetsi ha eyo Sharpeville ha iso ntlafatso ba nni ha o tsamaya ditrateng tsa teng ke dikoti fela Sharpeville nkare ha re khotsofatse bonneteng ba le bo faili ka hara Sharpeville o faili matlakala a tshetswe ditulo tsena kaofela ha ho sekolo ha re khotsofale ke Sharpeville ba ke la bo sekolo la go hlweka.
Some of these Ngogos and Madalas were just kids when they were led into the danger zone. They risked their lives for freedom and change. But one thing you notice in these interviews is that they are still poor. They paid the price but never got the reward. So I wonder how much it would cost to change the lives of these poor people, and if the current government ever had the resources to do so. Now, since we always hear about these massive amounts of money that are being wasted and mismanaged, I decided to look into that and see what could have been done with that money. Let's look at what 1 million rand can do for a person in poverty who lives in a shack that is freezing cold in winter and like an oven in summer. No running water, no toilet, food must be cooked outside on a fire unless they have an Izinyoka connection to the closest traffic light. Kids play outside in the filth and rubble because there's no refuge removal. Now, for 630,000 rand, you can get a 2-bedroom apartment. It's not a mansion, but it's a massive improvement from a shack. It's a nice and cozy home in a secure estate where kids can safely play outside. For about 50,000 more, you can get a car. This is not a BMW or a Mercedes, but it's also not a Skorokoro. It's reliable and will get you where you need to go. Then, if you invest the rest of the money, it's just over 320,000 rand, you can get about 30,000 rand per year, which is more than any government grant. If a healthy economy is maintained, there should be enough job opportunities, and the basic income will be enough to maintain this kind of lifestyle. The dignity gained in the change from this to this would be priceless. So the question is, where can we scratch out 1 million rand? Recently it came to light that the government has spent about 10 million rand on suspended director generals. In other words, political leaders who were caught doing something wrong, like stealing or wasting money, were suspended. Instead of being dismissed or disciplined, they were rewarded as they continue to receive a salary without needing to lift a finger. The lives of 10 families could have been changed by that 10 million rand forever. So where can we find more money? I believe in the importance of protecting and celebrating cultural practices and traditions. It makes sense that the government spends some money on the protection of cultural heritage like the royal families. But I was shocked when I found out how much they get. For example, The Zulu royal family alone gets more than 66 million rand a year. In a country where over 30 million people live in absolute poverty, the government pays 66 million rand per year to one family. This is what 66 million looks like. Now imagine if the lives of 66 families had been changed every year for the past 30 years. It's crazy. So where can we get more money from? The people of the UniteBlack municipality have protested many times over failing infrastructure because of corruption and mismanagement. In 2010, the UniteBlack municipality mismanaged funds of about 100 million, affecting essential services and infrastructure. The tap water was too dirty to drink. This is what 100 million looks like. This money could have changed the lives of 100 families. Now let's increase that by 2.5 times and go up to 250 million rand. 250 million rand can change the lives of 250 families, or it can buy one nkandla for one person with his many wives and kids. Now let's double that. This is what 500 million looks like. Last year, the Minister of Employment and Labour was accused of taking a bribe of 500 million rand. I don't know if any of these things are true or not. I'm just taking it from the news articles. But this person is responsible for employment and labor in South Africa. The one who needs to make sure there are enough jobs and opportunities for the citizens. 500 million can change the lives of 500 families or just be added to the wealth of one politician. Now let's move to the big numbers. If you double 500 million, you get 1 billion. It's 1,000 times a million. We often hear of cases where 1, 2, 3, 5 or 10 billion rand is mismanaged in state-owned enterprises like Eskom, Prasa, Transnet, etc. This is what 1 billion rand looks like. 1,000 families can each get 1 million rand and have their lives changed from this to this with 1 billion rand. With over 30 million people living in poverty, 1 billion is not enough. So let's take that and multiply that by 500. 500 billion is 500,000 times a million. It's a huge number, and I ran out of screen space to actually show it. But this is more or less what 500 billion looks like. Now remember, each one of these tiny blocks represents the change from a shack to a decent home, a car, and a monthly income for a family of 3 to 4 people. So you may wonder, did the government ever have an opportunity to help 500,000 poor families? Now back in 2020, the government allocated 500 billion rand for COVID relief. They received about 100 billion rand from the IMF and the World Bank alone. In my opinion, that was one of the biggest bribes ever paid in history. The most powerful institutions in the world gave enormous loans to some of the most corrupt governments in the world, including South Africa. Now imagine this. They give billions of dollars to corrupt leaders and tell them, since you need this urgently, we will give it to you and look away. You can spend it any way you think is needed and we will not hold you accountable. But there's 2 conditions. Number 1, we buy the country because that money must be paid back by the taxpayers. Number 2, if we say jump, you jump. If we say lockdown, you lockdown. If we say vaccinate, you... But luckily, South Africans have learned the hard way that you cannot always trust politicians. So we were like, oh, really? What? Must we trust you? So you could buy the vax certificate from anywhere. 500 billion could have changed 500,000 families forever. And it's gone. Now, if you double 500 billion rand, you get 1 trillion. There's no way I can show you on a screen what 1 trillion rand looks like because each one of those blocks of 1 million rand would be smaller than a pixel. Now they say that the state capture cost the country about 1 to 2 trillion rand. That's just the money we know about. And you know what they say, only the amateurs get caught. We will never know the real value, and some estimated it to be about 3 trillion rand in close to 10 years. If we only add these numbers and we ignore all the rest in between, we get to about 3.5 trillion rand. In other words, the lives of about 3.5 million families could have been changed forever. Multiply that by 3 if a family has 1 child, then it's about 10.5 million people. The lives of more than 1/3 of those living under the poverty line could have been changed by the money that our government has wasted in the past 30 years. Now, I just want to add one more thing to this illustration. So you get 3 types of politicians. Number 1, the wolf in sheep's clothing. It's probably the most dangerous of all. This type of politician preys on the poor by pretending to be one of them. However, behind the scenes, they take advantage of them. Maybe you can think of someone who is extremely wealthy and no one knows exactly where all the wealth comes from, yet they tell poor people that they will also get rich if they follow them. These politicians wear expensive designer watches and clothes, but when they address the poor, they put on something like an overall of sheepskin to blend in. Watch out for these politicians, because anyone willing to violently take from others and hurt them will not hesitate to do the same to their followers once they have more power. Number 2, the opportunists. This type of politician is often a good businessman. They are very skilled at seeing and using opportunities for personal gain. Normally in life, this isn't a bad thing, but in politics, it's a very dangerous thing for a country. Opportunists use the opportunities around them for personal gain, and politicians have many opportunities. This type of politician will always be the first in line to benefit from any given opportunity. Even if they have billions in the bank, they will never be satisfied. Watch out for these politicians, because they are smart and know exactly how to stay out of trouble while scooping up everything they can, leaving the people poor. Number 3, the leader. A dog will not think twice to lay down its life for the ones he loves. In the same way, a leader is someone who always puts the needs of others above their own. A leader uses every opportunity to help and uplift others. Nelson Mandela was a good example of a leader. Some black people didn't like him because he didn't want to take revenge. Some white people didn't like him because he was a terrorist. But in the end, he did what he believed was best for the South African people in general. In a time when change was necessary, he did whatever it took. But when he succeeded, he proved to the world that he did not fight racism because he was on the wrong side of it, but because it is wrong. In this image, you can see a good example of the difference between a leader and an opportunist. The opportunist is the one who wasn't even on the field, who made no contribution to the victory, but grabs the opportunity to exalt himself. This reminds me of the survivors from Sharpeville who paid the price, but someone else took the trophy from them to brag about it. The example of a good leader in this image is the person you can barely see because he stands right at the back behind the team. A leader gets satisfaction from contributing to the success of others. Soon we will all get a chance to vote again for change in South Africa. So let's all vote for Rassie Erasmus. Just kidding, but seriously, why don't we look out for leaders? Do not support the wolves in sheepskin. Do not support the opportunists. Let's look for leaders who can take South Africa forward. Thank you for listening.